She left bread at the lonely rancher's door, then found the letter he never meant her to see. The first time Clara Whitmore saw the hidden letter, she wished she had never opened the kitchen drawer. It was not addressed to her. It was not meant to be found. And yet her name was written inside. Outside, a hard Wyoming wind pushed dust across the yard of the Broken Spur Ranch. The barn doors groaned on their hinges, and a gray horse shifted beside the fence as if it sensed trouble before either of the two people inside the house did. Clara stood frozen near the stove, holding the folded paper in one trembling hand. From the porch came the slow sound of boots. Silas Reed was coming back inside. 3 years earlier, no one in the town of Cedar Ridge would have guessed that Clara Whitmore would become the one person still crossing the empty land to Silas Reed's ranch. Silas had once been known as a strong and cheerful man. He had raised cattle, helped neighbors during storms, and danced with his wife at every church supper whether there was music or not. Then fever took Anna Reed in the winter of 1881. After that, something in Silas closed. He still worked before sunrise. He still repaired fences, paid his debts, and spoke kindly when spoken to. But he stopped entering town unless he needed supplies. He stopped sitting near other families at church. He stopped looking toward the future. The house at Broken Spur became quiet. Too quiet. Clara understood that kind of silence. Her father had died when she was 19, leaving her a small farm, unpaid bills, and a mother whose health was already failing. By the time Clara was 27, she had buried both parents and learned how to mend a roof, bargain over livestock, plant through bad soil, and cry without making a sound. People in Cedar Ridge called her strong. They did not know strength had never been her choice. Every Thursday morning, Clara baked 2 loaves of bread. One stayed in her kitchen. The other went across the open mile between her farm and the Broken Spur Ranch. Silas always met her on the porch. "You keep feeding me, folks will think I cannot feed myself," he would say. "You can feed yourself," Clara always answered. "You simply refuse to do it properly." Then he would almost smile. Almost. That small change in his face was enough to bring her back the following week. On a cold Thursday near the end of October, Clara arrived carrying a loaf wrapped in a clean white cloth. Silas was repairing a saddle strap at the porch table. His sleeves were rolled to his elbows, and silver had begun to show at his temples. He looked up when her boots touched the steps. "You crossed that field in this wind. I have crossed it in worse. That does not make it wise. Neither does living on coffee and dried beef." Silas glanced at the bread. "Is that the one with honey?" "It might be." He took it from her carefully, as if it were something more valuable than bread. For one quiet moment, neither of them spoke. The wind moved the porch lantern even though it was not lit. Somewhere behind the barn, a loose sheet of tin knocked against wood. Silas looked at Clara, then down at the loaf in his hands. "A man could become spoiled by this," he said. "That would take more than bread." His eyes lifted to hers. There was warmth in them, but also fear. Clara had seen that look before. It was the look of a man who had reached for something once and lost it. Silas cleared his throat. "If I had been born 15 years later," he said lightly, "I might have asked you for more than a Thursday loaf." Clara did not laugh. The space between them changed. Silas seemed to notice it too. His fingers tightened around the cloth. Clara looked past him into the quiet house. A woman's blue shawl still hung on a peg near the door. Anna's shawl. Silas had never moved it. "Maybe the years are not the reason you never asked," Clara said. He stared at her. Before he could answer, hoofbeats sounded beyond the gate. A well-dressed rider approached on a chestnut horse. His coat was too fine for ranch work, and his hat had not seen much dust. Clara recognized Everett Cole, the new bank manager from Cedar Ridge. Everett smiled as he dismounted. "Miss Whitmore, I hoped I might find you at home." "You did not." His smile slipped for only a second. Then he looked at Silas. "Mr. Reed." Silas gave a short nod. Everett had been calling on Clara for 2 months. He brought polished manners, expensive coffee, and the approval of nearly every woman in Cedar Ridge. He also had a habit of speaking about Clara's farm as if it were a problem he planned to solve. "I came to remind you about Saturday's harvest supper," Everett said. "I saved you a place beside me." "I never agreed to go." "You said you would consider it." Clara's jaw tightened. Everett turned his smile toward Silas. "I suppose a ranch keeps a man too busy for such evenings." Silas set the bread on the porch table. "Some men choose where they spend their evenings." The words were calm, but the warning beneath them was not. Everett heard it. So did Clara. A tense silence followed. The chestnut horse pawed at the dirt. Wind carried dry leaves across the yard. Clara stepped down from the porch. "I should get back." Silas looked at her as though he wanted to stop her, but Everett was watching. So Silas said nothing. That silence hurt more than Clara expected. She walked toward her wagon without looking back. By noon, the sky had darkened. A storm came down from the western hills, sharp and sudden. Clara was halfway home when she realized she had left her mother's baking cloth at the ranch. She returned before the rain began. Silas was in the barn securing the horses, so Clara stepped inside the house to take the cloth from the porch table. A gust of wind pushed the door shut behind her. The bread was in the kitchen. Beside it sat an open drawer. Clara moved to close it. That was when she saw the letter. The paper was old and worn along the folds. Anna Reed's name was written at the bottom. Clara knew she should not read it. Then she saw her own name halfway down the page. She unfolded it. The first line made her breath catch. "Silas, when I am gone, do not punish yourself by turning away the woman who has already begun to care for you." Boots sounded on the porch. Clara lifted her eyes toward the door. The letter trembled in her hand as the latch began to turn. Silas opened the door and stopped. Rain had begun to strike the porch roof in hard, scattered drops. Wind pushed at his coat, but he did not move farther into the room. His eyes went first to Clara, then to the letter in her hand. For a moment, the whole house seemed to hold its breath. Clara folded the paper quickly, though there was no hiding what she had done. "I came back for the cloth," she said. Silas closed the door behind him. His face had gone still in the way it did when he was trying not to show pain. That drawer was shut. The wind must have pulled it open. And the wind unfolded the letter. Clara lowered her eyes. "No." Rain swept against the kitchen window. In the barn, one of the horses gave a nervous call. Silas removed his wet hat and placed it on the table. He did not reach for the letter. "How much did you read?" "Only the first lines." That was enough. The quiet in his voice struck harder than anger would have. Clara held the paper out to him. "I am sorry." He looked at it but still did not take it. "You should not have seen that." "I know. It belonged to Anna." "I know that too." His jaw tightened at the sound of his wife's name. Clara set the letter on the table between them. "I did not come here to search through your things." "No, you only came here every Thursday for 3 years." She looked up. There was bitterness in his words, but not toward her alone. It sounded like a man angry at himself for needing something he had never asked for. Silas turned toward the window. Water ran in crooked lines down the glass. "Anna wrote that during her last winter," he said. "She knew she was dying before I was willing to admit it." Clara said nothing. "She wrote several letters, one for her sister, one for the preacher, one for me." His voice grew rough. "That one was never meant for anyone else." Clara looked at the folded page. "Why did she write my name?" Silas closed his eyes for a moment. "I do not know." "That is not true." He turned around. The rain had darkened his shoulders, and a drop of water slid from his hair to the side of his face. He looked tired, older than he had on the porch, but also more exposed. "She noticed things," he said, Anna always noticed things. What things? Silas picked up the letter, folded it once more, and placed it back in the drawer. That you brought soup when she was too weak to cook. That you sat with her when I rode for the doctor. That you brought flowers even after she could no longer leave her bed. I cared about her. I know. Then why would she write that I already cared for you? He pushed the drawer closed. Because sick people sometimes try to arrange the lives of those they are leaving behind. Clara studied him. Is that what you believe? It is what I need to believe. The answer landed between them like a locked gate. A crack of thunder shook the window. The storm had fully reached the ranch now, turning the yard into a blur of mud and gray air. Silas glanced outside. You cannot ride home in this. I have ridden in storms before. You will stay until it passes. His tone left no room for argument, though his eyes would not meet hers. Clara removed her damp gloves. Then we should speak honestly while I am here. Silas gave a humorless breath. Honesty is what caused this trouble. No, silence caused it. He looked at her sharply. Clara stepped closer to the table. You made a joke about being younger. I told you the years were not the reason you never asked. Then Everett arrived and you let me leave without another word. What was I supposed to say in front of him? The truth. And what truth would that be? Clara's hand tightened around the edge of the table. That you did not want him there. Silas stared at her. The wind pressed against the house. Finally he said, I did not. Clara's heart beat harder. Why? He looked toward the blue shawl hanging by the door. That single glance answered before he did. Because wanting something does not make it right. Clara followed his gaze. Anna has been gone almost 4 years. She was my wife for 26. I am not asking you to forget her. You do not understand what you are asking. Then tell me. Silas gripped the back of a chair. I am 52 years old, Clara. You are 27. People will speak. They will say you were lonely. They will say I took advantage of your kindness. They will say you gave up a good future for a tired rancher who has already lived most of his. Clara's expression softened, but she did not look away. And what will you say? That they may be right. No. His brow tightened. You do not get to decide that for me, she said. You do not get to turn your fear into my answer. Silas released the chair and walked to the stove. He lifted the coffee pot, though it was empty, then set it down again. Clara had never seen his hands shake before. I buried a woman who trusted me with her whole life, he said. I stood beside that cottonwood and promised I would carry what was left with dignity. Then you began crossing that field, and every week this house felt less empty. His voice dropped. I started listening for your wagon. Clara did not move. I knew the sound of your wheels before I saw you. I knew when you were late. I knew when you had been crying even when you smiled, and every time I noticed I felt ashamed. Why? Because part of me was waiting for Thursday. The confession changed the room. Clara's anger faded, replaced by something deeper and more painful. That is not betrayal, she said. Silas looked toward the drawer. It felt like it. A sudden noise came from outside, not thunder, wood breaking. Silas moved to the window. The north corral gate had blown open. 3 horses were already crowding toward the gap. He grabbed his coat. Stay here. Clara reached for hers. I am coming. You are not. The mare in that corral frightens easily. She knows my voice. He hesitated, then gave one sharp nod. They ran into the storm together. Rain struck Clara's face as they crossed the yard. Mud pulled at her boots. Silas reached the gate first, but another gust tore it from his hands and sent it crashing against the post. The gray mare reared. Clara stepped slowly into the corral, speaking low and steady. Easy, June, easy now. The horse's wild eyes found her. Silas watched from the broken gate, rain streaming from his hat. For one dangerous second, the mare seemed ready to bolt. Then Clara held out her hand. The horse lowered its head. Silas moved quickly, secured the lead rope, and guided the animals back while Clara held the gate against the wind. Together they forced the broken latch into place with a length of chain. When it was done, they stood breathless in the rain. Silas looked at Clara with an expression she had never seen before. Not grief, not caution, fear, but the fear was not for himself. "You could have been hurt," he said. "So could you. That is different." "No, Silas, it is not." He opened his mouth, but hoofbeats sounded beyond the storm. A rider was approaching fast from the Cedar Ridge Road. Everett Cole came through the rain, bent low over his horse. He pulled up near them, pale and breathing hard. "Clara," he called, "your barn roof has fallen in." She froze. Everett looked from her to Silas. "And your hired boy is still inside." Clara did not remember climbing onto Silas's spare horse. One moment she was standing in the rain beside the broken corral gate, and the next she was riding hard across the dark field with Silas beside her and Everett close behind. Wind tore at her coat. Rain blurred the land ahead. The narrow creek between the two properties had already risen over its banks, turning the low ground into a sheet of brown water. Her farm appeared through the storm. The barn roof had collapsed on the eastern side. One wall leaned outward. Loose boards struck against each other in the wind. A frightened mule pulled at its rope near the fence. "Caleb," Clara shouted. No answer came. Caleb Turner was 16, thin as a fence rail, and too proud to admit when he was afraid. Clara had hired him the previous spring after his mother died, and his father disappeared toward Montana. He slept in the small room behind her kitchen and worked harder than any grown man she had known. That morning, she had told him to move the grain sacks away from the leaking roof. Now half the roof lay inside the barn. Clara reached the door first, but Silas caught her arm. "You do not go in until I see what is holding." "He is inside." "I know." "Then let go of me." Another section of roof groaned above them. Silas did not release her. "Clara, look at me." She did. Rain ran down his face, but his eyes were steady. "If the beam shifts, we all die under it. Give me 1 minute." She wanted to fight him. Every part of her wanted to pull free and run inside. Then a weak voice came from beneath the fallen boards. "Miss Clara." Her knees nearly gave way. "I am here, Caleb." Silas stepped into the barn. Everett followed him, though he hesitated at the doorway. The inside smelled of wet hay, split wood, and frightened animals. A heavy beam had fallen across the center aisle. Behind it, Clara could see Caleb's boot beneath a broken stall gate. "He is pinned," Silas said. Clara moved beside him. A support post leaned at a dangerous angle. Every gust made it shift. Silas pointed toward a thick rope hanging near the tack wall. "We brace the post first." Everett stared at the roof. This place could come down at any moment. Silas looked at him, then stand outside. The words were not spoken loudly, but Everett's face hardened. "I rode through that storm to warn her. And now the boy needs more than a warning." Everett glanced at Clara, perhaps expecting her to defend him. She was already reaching for the rope. Silas tied one end around the leaning post. He threw the other over a ceiling brace that had not yet broken. "Clara, pull when I say." "What are you doing?" "Getting under the beam." "No. It is the only way to lift the gate. You cannot hold that weight alone." "I do not intend to." He looked at Everett. For 1 second, neither man moved. Then Everett removed his coat and stepped forward. "Tell me where." Silas showed him where to place his shoulder beneath the beam. Clara wrapped the rope around her hands. The wet fibers burned her palms. "Now," Silas said. She pulled. The post shifted upright a few inches. Silas and Everett lifted the broken gate. Caleb cried out. Clara dropped the rope and crawled through the narrow opening. "Hold it," Silas shouted. She reached Caleb. Blood ran from a small cut near his hairline, but his eyes were open. "My leg," he whispered. A board trapped his ankle. Clara pushed it away and dragged him toward her. He bit down on his sleeve to keep from crying out. The roof groaned again. "Move, Clara," Silas yelled. She pulled Caleb beneath the beam. Everett's boots slid in the mud. The gate dropped slightly. Silas gave a strained sound as the weight came down across his shoulder. Clara got Caleb clear. "Silas, take the boy out. I am not leaving you. Take him out now." There was no time to argue. Clara dragged Caleb toward the door. Everett released the beam and stumbled after them. Silas remained beneath it. The leaning post snapped. A thunder of wood filled the barn. Clara turned in time to see dust and rain swallow him. She screamed his name. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Clara shoved Caleb into Everett's arms and ran back inside. The fallen roof had blocked the center aisle. Through the gray dust, she saw a hand beneath the boards. Silas's hand. She dropped to her knees and began pulling away broken pieces of wood. "Help me." Everett laid Caleb near the doorway and came to her side. Together they lifted a split plank. Silas lay beneath it, his hat gone, one side of his face pressed into the mud. A heavy beam rested across his back, but the broken stall gate had kept its full weight from crushing him. Clara touched his cheek. "Silas." His eyes opened slowly. "Boy safe?" "Yes." Only then did he close his eyes again. Clara's breath caught. "Do not you dare." His eyes opened once more. "I am only resting. This is not the time." Something almost like a smile touched his mouth. Even hurt, even half buried beneath a barn, he was trying to calm her. Everett found a long fence rail and used it as a lever. Clara braced the broken gate while he pushed. The beam rose just enough for Silas to drag himself free. They carried him into the house as the rest of the barn settled behind them. By evening, the storm had weakened. Caleb's ankle was badly bruised but not broken. Silas had a deep cut along his shoulder and could barely lift his left arm. Clara cleaned the wound at her kitchen table. He sat without complaint while she wrapped a strip of linen around him. His shirt lay torn on the floor, and an old scar crossed his ribs, pale and uneven. Clara's hands trembled. Silas noticed. "I have had worse. That does not make this small." He watched her tie the bandage. "You went back into the barn." "So did you. I told you to stay out. And I did not listen." "No," he said quietly, "you rarely do." She looked at him. The words carried no anger, only relief. Across the room, Everett stood near the stove, mud drying on his boots. He had helped save both Caleb and Silas, yet something troubled his face. Finally, he reached into his coat and placed a folded document on the table. "I did not ride out only because of the storm," he said. Clara turned toward him. "What is that?" Everett looked at Silas before answering. "A notice from the bank." Clara wiped her hands on a cloth and opened it. The first line made the room colder than the rain outside. Her farm loan had been called due. Not in 6 months. Not after winter. In 14 days. Clara read the figure twice. It was more money than she could raise by selling every animal she owned. This cannot be right. Everett's silence told her it was. Silas reached for the paper. "Who ordered this?" "My employer." "Your employer is the bank manager." Everett's jaw tightened. "My father still owns the controlling share." Clara looked at him slowly. "And what does your father want?" Everett did not answer at first. Outside, water dripped from the roof into the dark yard. Caleb shifted in the next room. A lantern flame bent inside its glass. Then Everett spoke. He wants the Whitmore land. Silas's expression hardened. For what? Everett looked toward the rain-covered window, toward the field between Clara's farm and the Broken Spur Ranch. The railroad survey changed last month, he said. The new freight line is coming through this valley. Clara stared at him. Everett lowered his voice. And your land is worth 10 times what anyone in Cedar Ridge knows. The paper lay between them like a blade. Clara looked from the bank notice to the dark window, where the rain had softened to a steady whisper against the glass. My father borrowed against this farm 12 years ago, she said. I have never missed a payment. Everett's face tightened. That is true. Then the bank has no cause to demand the full amount. It does if the note contains an early repayment clause. Silas read the document again. His injured shoulder made every movement slow, but anger sharpened his eyes. Did Clara know about this clause? Everett said nothing. Clara understood before he answered. My father could barely read, she said. Your father knew that. Everett looked down. The lantern flame flickered between them. Silas pushed the notice across the table. Your father buried a trap in the papers. I was not at the bank then. But you are there now. Everett's jaw worked as if he were swallowing words he did not want to speak. I found the order this morning, he said. I rode out because I thought Clara deserved warning. Warning is not the same as stopping it, Silas replied. Everett's eyes hardened. You think I do not know that? Clara placed both hands flat on the table. What happens if I cannot pay in 14 days? Everett met her gaze. The bank takes the property, and then your father sells it to the railroad. He will not sell it. Silas went still. Everett drew a slow breath. My father has been buying land through other names for almost a year. The new line will bring warehouses, stock pens, and a freight station. He means to control all of it. Clara looked toward the wall beyond which Caleb slept. Her mother's curtains still hung over the window. Her father's old rifle rested above the hearth, unloaded but never removed. Every floorboard in the house carried some memory of the people she had lost. Now a man in town intended to turn those memories into profit. There must be a way to fight it, she said. There may be, Everett answered, but you need the original loan papers. They are in my father's desk. Everett shook his head. The copies at the bank do not match the terms recorded in the county ledger. Someone changed the repayment date. Silas's expression grew colder. You are saying it was altered. I am saying I cannot prove it without the original. Clara looked toward the small study near the back of the house. Her father's desk had remained there since his death. She used it for accounts, but the bottom drawer had been locked for years. The key had disappeared before the funeral. She stood. Silas rose with her, then winced as pain crossed his face. You stay seated, Clara said. I can walk. You can barely lift your arm. I only need one. Despite everything, the answer almost made her smile. They entered the study with Everett behind them. The room smelled of old paper and damp wood. Clara knelt before the desk. The bottom drawer had a narrow brass lock darkened with age. My father kept tax records in here, she said. Maybe the loan papers, too. Silas examined the lock. Do you have a thin knife? Clara handed him one from the kitchen. He worked carefully, though his injured shoulder trembled. After a moment, the lock clicked. Inside were account books, receipts, and a small wooden box. Clara lifted the box onto the desk. It contained her mother's wedding ribbon, a dried sprig of lavender, and several folded documents tied with string. The original loan agreement was beneath them. Everett took it to the lantern. His eyes moved quickly over the page. Then he turned it over. There, he said. A handwritten line appeared near the bottom, signed by Everett's father. The loan could not be called due, as long as yearly payments were made before the first day of December. Clara let out a breath. Then the notice is false. Not yet, Everett said. He held the agreement beside the bank copy. The signatures were the same, but the seal on Clara's original was faint and partly broken. My father will claim this is not the final document. Silas leaned closer. Who witnessed it? Everett pointed to the names. One belonged to a lawyer who had died years earlier. The other made Clara's blood run cold. Anna Reed. Silas took the paper. His wife's signature stood clearly at the bottom. Clara remembered Anna visiting her mother often during those years, carrying baskets of eggs and jars of preserves. She had never known Anna was present when the loan was signed. She witnessed the agreement, Clara said. Silas stared at the name. She may have kept a record. Where? He thought for a moment. Anna wrote down everything important. Births, debts, promises, cattle trades. She kept journals. Everett straightened. If one of those journals mentions the loan terms, the county judge may accept it as supporting evidence. Silas's face changed. Clara saw it at once. There is something you are not saying. He folded the agreement carefully. Anna's journals are not at the ranch. Where are they? For several seconds, only Rain answered. Then Silas looked at her. Before she died, she gave a locked trunk to her sister in Red Hollow. Clara knew the name. Red Hollow sat 2 days north, beyond a narrow mountain pass that early snow often closed without warning. Then we go tomorrow, she said. Silas shook his head. I go. With that shoulder. I know the road. So do I. Everett stepped between them. There is another problem. Neither spoke. My father knows the original papers may still exist, he said. He sent 2 men to search the Whitmore house this afternoon. Clara's eyes moved toward the window. A faint sound came from the yard. Not Rain. A horse shifting near the porch. Silas reached for the lamp and lowered the flame. Everett slowly drew the curtain aside. 2 riders stood beyond the fence. One held a coil of rope. The other was looking directly at the study window. Silas put one finger to his lips. The house went still. Clara could hear Caleb breathing in the next room. The boy had fallen asleep from pain and exhaustion, unaware that 2 strangers stood outside the fence. Everett lowered the curtain. They work for my father, he whispered. The taller one is Harlan Pike. He handles matters my father does not want connected to the bank. Silas reached for the rifle above the hearth. Clara caught his wrist. It is not loaded. I know. Then what good will it do? Sometimes a man only needs to believe it is. Silas opened the drawer beneath the kitchen shelf and took out a small box of cartridges. Clara stared at him. You said it was unloaded. It was. He loaded 2 rounds, then stopped. No anger showed on his face. That frightened Clara more than anger would have. Everett moved toward the back door. There is a path behind the smokehouse. Clara can take Caleb and ride to town. No, Clara said. The papers stay with me. Then take them. And leave Silas here. Silas looked at her. That may be the safest choice. For whom? His eyes held hers for a moment before he turned away. A fist struck the front door. Miss Whitmore, a man called. Bank business. Everett's face lost its color. Harlan knocked again, harder this time. We know Mr. Cole is in there. Silas handed the original agreement to Clara. Put it somewhere they will not find it. Clara crossed to her mother's old sewing cabinet. Beneath the lowest drawer was a narrow space her father had built years earlier to hide tax money from thieves. She slipped the papers inside and closed it. The knocking stopped. That silence was worse. A moment later, glass shattered in the study. Clara flinched. Silas moved into the hallway, rifle raised. Stay behind me. I am not hiding behind you. This is not the time to be stubborn. You chose the wrong woman for that request. Despite the danger, something warm passed through his eyes. Then the study door opened. Harlan Pike stepped into the hall, rain dripping from his coat. He was broad through the shoulders, with a crooked nose and a scar running from one ear to his jaw. Another man climbed through the broken window behind him. Harlan saw Silas's rifle and stopped. "No need for trouble." "You entered her house through a window," Silas said. "Trouble came with you." Harlan looked at Everett. "Your father wants you back in town." Everett stood straighter. "My father no longer gives me orders." The second man laughed. Harlan did not. "Where are the loan papers?" Clara stepped beside Silas. "They belong to me." "Not for long." Silas shifted the rifle toward Harlan's chest. "Leave." Harlan studied him, then smiled without warmth. "You will not shoot." "No," Silas said, "but I will make you wonder long enough for the sheriff to arrive." The smile disappeared. "There is no sheriff coming." A voice answered from the porch. "That is unfortunate because I am already here." Sheriff Wade Mercer entered with his revolver drawn. Behind him stood Ruth Bell, Clara's closest friend, soaked from the storm and holding a lantern in one hand. Clara stared at her. Ruth gave a nervous shrug. "Everett passed my wagon on the road. Something felt wrong, so I rode into town." Harlan's gaze moved between the sheriff and Silas. "This is private bank business." "Breaking a window is public enough for me," Wade said. The two men were searched, disarmed, and taken outside. Before Harlan reached the porch, he looked back at Clara. "The paper will not save you," he said. "The old woman's journal is already gone." Silas lowered the rifle. "What did you say?" Harlan smiled again. "Ask Cole's father." Wade pushed him into the rain. The house grew quiet after the riders left, but no one felt safe. Everett stood near the stove, staring at the broken glass. "My father knows about Anna's journals." Silas's face was pale with more than pain. "How?" Everett rubbed one hand over his mouth. "I mentioned the witness name when I first found the altered bank copy. I thought I could reason with him." "You warned him," Clara said. "I did not know he would send men after the trunk." Silas set the rifle down. "When did you tell him?" 3 days ago. Red Hollow was a 2-day ride. If Everett's father had sent someone immediately, they might already have reached Anna's sister. Silas moved toward the door. Clara blocked him. "You cannot ride tonight." "I can." "You can barely stand." "The trunk is the only proof left." "The agreement is proof." "Not enough if the judge believes it was changed later." Everett looked at Clara. "He is right." She hated hearing it. Silas reached for his coat, but pain caught him when he lifted his injured arm. His face tightened, and he leaned briefly against the wall. Clara took the coat from him. "We leave at first light," she said. "You are staying here." "No." "Clara." "You went into a falling barn for Caleb. You stood between me and armed men. Do not ask me to watch you ride into the mountains alone with one working arm." His voice lowered. "I cannot let anything happen to you." The words silenced the room. Clara stepped closer. "Then stop trying to protect me by leaving me behind." Silas looked at her, as though every fear he had carried for 4 years had risen at once. "I have already buried one woman I loved." Clara's breath caught. Silas seemed to realize what he had said. He looked away, but it was too late. Ruth quietly led Everett into the next room, giving them the privacy neither had asked for. Clara's eyes filled, though she did not let the tears fall. "You love me." Silas stared at the rain-dark floor. "I did not mean to say it this way." "But you meant it." His hand closed around the edge of the table. "Yes." The answer was plain and almost broken. Clara reached for him. Silas stepped back. That is exactly why you cannot come. No, she said softly, that is exactly why I will. A long silence passed. Then she touched his uninjured hand. He did not pull away. For the first time since Anna's death, Silas allowed someone to hold onto him without pretending he did not need it. If you believe courage sometimes means walking beside someone instead of saving them from afar, stay with this story. The hardest truth was still waiting in Red Hollow. At dawn, Clara saddled 2 horses. Everett remained behind to guard Caleb and prepare a statement for the sheriff. Ruth packed food, blankets, and a small tin of medicine. Snow had begun to gather on the distant peaks. Silas looked north toward the mountain pass. We may not reach Red Hollow before dark. We will reach it, Clara said. They rode side by side into the cold morning. By noon, the wind turned sharp. By evening, snow covered the trail. Then, at the narrowest part of the pass, Clara saw smoke rising beyond the trees. They followed it to a small cabin near the ridge. The door stood open. Inside, a woman lay unconscious beside an overturned chair. The locked trunk was gone, and on the floor, written in ash with a shaking hand, were 2 words. Broken spur. Silas crossed the cabin in 2 steps and knelt beside the woman. Lydia. Anna Reed's sister opened her eyes at the sound of his voice. For one frightened moment, she did not seem to know him. Then her hand caught his sleeve. They took it, she whispered. Clara knelt on the other side. Who took the trunk? Lydia's breathing shook. 2 men, one had a scar. She looked toward the open door. They searched everything. When they found Anna's trunk, they asked about the journal. Harlan Pike, Silas said. Clara touched the ash words on the floor. Why did you write broken spur? Lydia's eyes moved to Silas. Because the journal was never in the trunk. Silas went still. Lydia pushed herself upright with Clara's help. Anna knew someone might come looking one day. She sent the trunk to me, but she kept the important book hidden at your ranch. Where? Silas asked. Lydia closed her eyes, searching through pain and memory. She said it was beneath the thing you refused to move. Silas's face changed. Clara understood at once. The blue shawl. They left Lydia with a neighbor before sunrise. The ride back through the pass was slower and more dangerous. Snow covered the rocks, and Silas's injured shoulder had stiffened until he could barely hold the reins. Clara watched him lean forward in the saddle, pale from pain but unwilling to stop. Near dusk, the Broken Spur Ranch came into view. Smoke rose from the chimney. Too much smoke. Silas spurred his horse. The kitchen door hung open. Drawers had been emptied across the floor. Chairs lay overturned. Anna's blue shawl was gone from its peg. Clara searched the hearth, the cupboards, the walls. Where would she hide it? Silas stood beneath the empty peg. She said beneath the thing I refused to move. He looked down. A narrow floorboard ran beneath the wall. Clara fetched a knife. Together they lifted it. Inside the hollow space lay a small leather journal wrapped in faded blue cloth. Silas held it as though it were Anna's hand. He opened to the final pages. There, in careful writing, was the full account of the Whitmore loan. Anna had recorded the payment terms, the signatures, and the promise made by Everett's father that the farm could never be taken while payments remained current. Below it was another entry. Silas read it silently. Clara saw his eyes fill. What does it say? He handed her the journal. Anna had written that Silas would mistake grief for loyalty if he was not careful. She wrote that love did not become false simply because it arrived after loss. Then she named Clara. Not as a replacement, as a woman with enough courage to see the life still left in him. Clara closed the book gently. She knew. Silas looked toward the empty peg. She knew before I did. Hoofbeats sounded outside. Everett entered the house with Sheriff Wade and Reverend Hale, who also served as Cedar Ridge's county clerk. We found my father at the station, Everett said. He was preparing to leave. Behind them, 2 deputies brought in Everett's father. Gideon Cole no longer looked like the powerful banker who had ruled Cedar Ridge from behind a polished desk. His coat was dusty, and his face had the gray look of a man whose plans had finally reached their end. Everett placed the altered bank copy beside Anna's journal. "The county seal number in the journal matches the original ledger," he said. "The repayment order was forged." Reverend Hale examined the documents carefully. "This is enough." Gideon looked at his son. "You would destroy your own family for her land." Everett's voice was quiet. "No, you did that when you decided every promise had a price." The sheriff arrested Gideon for fraud, unlawful seizure, and ordering the break-in at Clara's farm. Harlan Pike confessed before sunrise, hoping for mercy. Within a week, the bank notice was canceled. Clara's farm remained hers. Everett resigned from the bank and later opened a small legal office beside the feed store. He never again asked Clara to the harvest supper, but he earned something better than her affection. He earned her respect. Winter settled over the valley. Caleb's ankle healed. The barn was rebuilt with lumber donated by half the town. Even those who had once whispered about Clara and Silas arrived with hammers, nails, hot coffee, and fewer opinions than before. On the first warm morning of spring, Clara carried a loaf of honey bread across the field. Silas waited on the broken spur porch. The blue shawl hung once more beside the door. He had repaired it carefully where Harlan had torn the edge. Clara placed the bread on the railing. Silas looked at it, then at her. "I have spent months trying to find the proper words." "That sounds like you." He almost smiled. "I am still older than you." "I noticed. People may still talk. They will grow tired. I have no grand house, no bank, no fine promises." Clara stepped closer. "You have never offered me anything you did not mean." Silas took a small object from his pocket. It was not a costly ring. It was a plain silver band that had belonged to his mother. His hand trembled as he held it out. "Clara Whitmore, I cannot promise you a life without sorrow. I know too much to make that promise, but I can promise you will never carry it alone." Tears rose in Clara's eyes. "That is the only promise I wanted." They married beneath the cottonwood where Anna rested. No one hid her name. No one pretended the past had vanished. Clara placed a small piece of blue cloth beside the grave before taking Silas's hand. Years later, when people told the story, they often spoke about the forged papers, the mountain ride, and the journal beneath the floor. But Clara remembered something smaller. A lonely man standing on a porch with warm bread in his hands. A foolish joke about lost years. And the moment he finally understood that love had not come too late. It had simply waited until he was brave enough to open the door.